So today we're going to have a look, and I'm going to talk about probably the biggest book in the Advanced Dungeons and Dragons series. It's probably the thickest by all means. And you probably remember when I talked about the Player's Handbook, we used to call that the PHB, and we used to call this book the DMG. And the book, of course, is the Dungeon Master's Guide. You can see it here. Really, it's a really, we could probably get away with the cover back then, but not now. You can see there's a really scantily dressed female there. But it's just sort of like coming up and fighting. And this, I have to say, it smells all musty. You know when books smell musty? This is what it does. And it is in very, I think, in pretty good condition. So this was a Dungeon Master's Guide that for Advanced Dungeons and Dragons first edition. That's what I played, first edition. Yeah, honestly, I got bullied so much at school for being a devil worshipper. It was unbelievable. But it was a real thing then. You know, people were, I remember there was a news story saying, and these people are dealing with the devil doing Dungeons and Dragons. It was quite serious, quite serious. But I mean, let's face it, I'm 56 at Christmas, and you know I still haven't succumbed. So the Dungeon Master's Guide was really for the DM to sort of like all the information of that, and there was loads and loads of tables like this. That, I mean, this one is values of other rare commodities. And fur types, beaver, fox, marten, mink, muskrat, sable, seal. So it was just sort of like, wow, so much. It said that to me, not really. So there's a whole load of really interesting stuff in here. And I wanted to share with you some of the things that I really liked. And of course, you might have guessed the thing that I really liked the most were the pictures. I mean, that is epic artistry, isn't it? There's no color in this book at all. No color at all, but something like that is such a good image. I love it so much. And my favorite, there was a bit of humor as well. There was a bit of humor. So can you see that one down there, that little cartoon? And underneath it, it says, "It's a great new fancy role-playing game. We pretend we're workers and students in an industrialized and technological society." How comical is that? That is so funny. I thought, you know, how clever. And I'm trying to find my favorite picture ever. And it is when we started to talk about monsters. Oh, that's the next one that I want to have a look at. But oh, I can't find. I'll find. I should have put a bookmark in it. I should have bookmarked it. There. Let me just flick through. I might be able to flick through and find it. Oh, I think it's close to here. I'll find it in a while if it doesn't come straight up. But it's a fantastic picture of a party encountering a rust monster, and it's absolutely hilarious. It's purely visual, what you see. You know, it's not complicated or anything like that, but it is so funny. It just makes me laugh every time when I see it. There was some really fantastic pictures like this, you know, that were really well drawn and so good. But the thing that, oh, I found it. I just opened it. So I don't know if you know what a rust monster is in D&D, but a rust monster attacks metal. And this picture needs no words at all. How funny is that? I just think that's a fantastic image. I just love it to death. I just think it's brilliant. However, the bit that I really wanted to point out to you is things like in D&D, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons First Edition, everything was quite different. So the idea that if you were a magic user, you had different THACOs, and a THACO was to hit armor class 0. So if my THACO was 20, I knew that I had to roll a natural 20 or 20 or above with modifiers to hit the monster. But if somebody, I would then say to my players, they would say, what are their armor classes? And I would say 4. So they would then know that because their THACO was 20, if their arm class was 4, then they would need 16 or above. So we used to sort of like share armor classes quite naturally, but every fighter, every class, so clerics and druids, fighters, rogues and magic users all had different THACOs. And we had huge tables like this to actually wade through. So it wasn't just sort of like one person, one to hit roll. Every character had different to hit rolls. Now, the bit that I wanted to just spend some time on, and I apologize because I would like to read it. There's a description in the DMG about a first game, a first adventure, and it's so reminiscent of what D&D was actually like. This is what Advanced Dungeons and Dragons were like. So, for example, say they sort of like said at one point, they would like a marching order. And this was a great thing in Advanced Dungeons and Dragons because it was literally Dungeons and Dragons. There was very little role play in that era. It was almost like you would have dungeons like this that you would have to go and seek out and kill everybody. And there was no interaction at all. So it was a bit like you would open one door and there would be 6 goblins in that door. You would kill those, close the door, go to the next door along, open it up, and there'll be 4 bugbears. And the bugbears and the goblins never fought each other, and they were always behind the doors, and they just sat very quietly in their like hotel room, and that was it. They never moved or anything like that. It was just sort of like completely fixated and no relationship. Anyway, one of the things that we always used to have to do is have a marching order. And it was always a big question, where do you put people? And of course, all the rogues gravitated to the rear so they could hide in shadows and move silently and things like that. They didn't have the stealth skill then. You actually had hide in shadows, move silently, and things like that. And the DM in the book says you'll need a marching order. and the players hand them a marching order, and the DM says, "Why are you doing this?" And they say, the DM says, "Why are the gnome and the halfling in the front rank, the magic user in the middle, and the human fighter and cleric in the rear?" And they reply, "That way all 5 of us can act when we encounter an enemy. The magic user can cast spells over the heads of the short characters in front, and the pair in the backward rank can do likewise, or fire missiles or whatever is needed, including a quick move to the front." And this idea that we were setting up this marching order so that everybody could actually fight each other in an encounter. I also remember that when you went into a room, say there were 6 people in your party, and you went into a room and there were 6 goblins in there, then it wasn't sort of like they attacked the front row of people. It wasn't anything like that. It's like, how many players do you have? 6. There's 6 goblins, so that's 1 each. You know, hard luck to the poor magic users that had a maximum of 4 hit points, an armor class of normally 10, which was unarmored, you know, and only either had a staff, dagger, or dart with them. And they only had 1 spell for the whole adventure. And once they cast it, that was it. That was it. You didn't have another one at all. And then they encounter, would you believe, you won't believe this, they encounter a spider. Okay, a spider. And all of a sudden, the DM says the following: "Just as the 3 are about to position to look down the passages while the cleric is heading for the rotting bags, the magic user, poor magic user, cries out, and you see something black and nasty looking upon her shoulder. And somebody says, 'Everyone, quick, see what's attacked her.' Then turning to the referee, 'We'll all rush over there and kill whatever's attacked her. What do we see? A large spider. A large spider. Before you can make any action, the magic user must make a saving throw with +2 to the die, of course. And then she and the spider must roll initiative to fight a round of combat.'" And it's just sort of like classic D&D. This is just classic D&D. You know, it's sort of like she actually picks it off and throws it. I have no idea how big this spider is. But it's full. The whole adventure is full of so many stereotypical ideas behind this idea of dungeons and dragons and things like that. You know, they come across a series of coffins, you know, and guess what's in the coffins, or like zombies and skeletons and things like that. And I do think one of them nearly dies in it. I'm sure one of them nearly dies. But I love at the end, he sort of like says, "And as they come to the edge, you detect a smell coming from them." 4 of them, in fact, which sort of like dictated there were zombies. And then the little postscript says, "What will the party do? Will the cleric realize that they are ghouls and attempt to turn them? Will he succeed? If not, there may well be no survivors. If so, what treasure lies beyond? Possibly the great gem, but the thief still awaits the party's return. Well, that is the stuff from which adventures are spun. And now you know how to spin your own." How fantastic is that? I mean, as a teenage lad, I was reading that thinking, oh, yes, it's time for me to spin my own adventures. Absolutely fantastic. There are some pages that are quite torn. And these are the magical items pages. These are the magical items that you could sort of like gain. And there were some fantastic magical items. And I think there was one called the +1 Flaming Tongue Sword. That was +1, +2 against regenerating creatures, +3 against cold using creatures, and +4 versus undead. I mean, that was a magical item to have. And there were some others really exciting magical items. There was what's known as a portable hole. So my favorite, duct tape. I like that. A portable hole that you could put down. And there were sort of like rings. There were rods of smiting and lordly might. And one of the things about D&D, it was so much about the magical items, you know, because these magical items really made your character. And it's interesting that in the game of Mithras, we have no races. We're all human. And there's technically no magical items either, you know, none at all. And I've used, yeah, exactly. There was so used. And of course, there were things like bags of holding. You probably remember bags of holding that you could put many things into. There were girdles of giant strength. Do you remember giant strength girdles? And that it was like a belt that gave you giant power. And I think the weakest one was the hill giant. And the strongest one was the storm giant. You know, you had different, and that would actually make you a lot stronger. So it was really popular from fighters, etc. I do remember there was a whole lot of potions that you could have. And the potions range from animal control up to water breathing. But I always remember that the way people would test the potion would be to take a little sip of it and see what happens. But not if it was poison, you never took enough to kill you. You just took some hit points of damage or something like that. But the gaseous form was a wonderful magical item potion. And I remember there being a picture somewhere of the bottle overturned and the character in like a smoke. I don't know whether or not it's in this book or not. It'd be interesting. One of the things that I really loved about so when I never really played D&D, but I was really into my magic user. I really liked the idea of being a magic user class. And I actually lived with that into MMOs for quite a few years. Now I'm going more sort of like healing, but with weapons, you know, rather than staffs. But there were so many wonderful staffs. The staff of the serpent, you know, there. And there was a wonderful staff of the Magi that allowed you to do various things free of charges. Everything, of course, came with a charge in those days. I don't know whether or not it still does in D&D 5th edition. But if you had a rod, it had so many charges on it. And then if you used the last charge, it turned to dust. But you could get it sort of like recharged via magic. But the other thing that we had is this is not as a portable hole. This is a sphere of annihilation, which I just sort of like think a sphere of annihilation. Can you imagine what your life as a DM would be if you actually gave somebody a sphere of annihilation? Still have charges, but some. Oh, right. So they've kept some of it. I do think that D&D Advanced Dungeons and Dragons was 5th edition is so much better for the players. And I think if some of them tried to play AD&D 1st edition, they would get a shock, you know, because their characters in 5e are so much better. There was in here as well a whole load of really really extreme magical items, and you could even make things like intelligent swords. So you could make swords that actually had intelligence. And I was trying to think. There was one dungeon called, it might have been the Tomb of Horrors or something like that, that there was a sword called, I want to say Black Razor, but that might not be right. But I think Eldrick, there was some writings done of sort of like a drow called Eldrick. I'm sure that was his name. And he sort of like had a sword that was possessed by evil spirits, and you know, he would actually suck the life out of people when he used it. I think the things with the magical items in D&D was that you know, it really changed your character. I had to talk, yeah, exactly, you know, and I often thought it was super high fantasy. And one of the reasons, and this is not my parody that I'm talking about, it's somebody else's. They were saying that, I think I tell you who it was. It was Rod. I forget his surname. He creates classic fantasy, which is a bit like Mithras, but in D&D times. And he was saying that one of the reasons he moved away from D&D 5th edition was this idea that, you know, the party are walking down a pathway, and a whole load of bandits jump out and holds the crossbow bolt to the chest of the person and says, your money or your life. And in D&D, people will just say, well, I'm sorry, I've got 59 hit points and your crossbow bolt's going to do 1d6. Take your best shot. You know, and it was that sort of like idea. Well, in Mithras, that does not happen. You know, they could fire off their crossbow and 1d6 is enough to take your head off, you know, without protection. So it's completely the other way. And that's what I like about it. The other thing, and I talked about it in some of my other videos, is that if you meet a dragon in Mithras, you will be, one of two things will happen. You'll either run or you'll die. You know, it would be so difficult to sort of like stay alive in that sense. And I do like that in the sense that it promotes different ways of thinking. Well, most people just say, oh, we'll just charge in. With Mithras, you have to think, So I don't know if anybody's listening to the game last Saturday. The group has just been talking in the Discord, and they've decided that they want to go off and stalk and capture this beast that is out there. And I thought that's going to be really interesting because it obviously comes out at night. That's the only time they've seen it. And yet they're all humans. They are literally all humans, you know, and that's going to be a fun battle. I tell you, a fun battle. The other things that I wanted to sort of like point out, I've died for dragons in 5e. Good. That's good. I ain't storming in no way yet. No, yeah, the crab is Death Pincer, which would be something else, the giant crab. There are some wonderful pictures like this along the bottom, which I absolutely love. And I do remember sat here. So how much does a dragon do? Actually, I can tell you. if I can get it out. 5e. Let's see, how much damage does a dragon do? What? 2d6 plus 8 with a claw attack. 2d6 plus 8. That ain't a lot. That's not a lot, really. That's not a lot if you think what a 10th level fighter hit points could have. The other thing I really like about, and I think what you're referring to, Tex, as well, is when the DM sort of like makes it more powerful, or really sort of like demonstrates that you're not, you're literally going to die if you do it. That was an adult gold dragon that I looked at. Let me have a look. See if I can find it again. Well, hang on. I found a red dragon, which were one of my... an adult red dragon or an ancient red dragon has a challenge rating of 24. Challenge rating for an adult red dragon is 17. And that's 2d6 plus 8. So it is about the challenge rating. I remember being the only person who tried to talk their way out of every encounter. Yeah. I hadn't realized that we were basically gods. Yeah. And one of the things, and I did a video about it, one of the things that really gets my back up in games, especially role-playing games, is when somebody doesn't invest points into social skills, but then relies on their role-playing ability. And so I'm always sort of like saying to people, if they talk to somebody to try to convince them, I say, roll your influence. That's the main social skill. And so it's very much a case of, yeah, it's not whether or not you can as in a person. For me, it's all about the character and whether or not the character can do it. So one of the things that you might have seen in the recent Mithras adventure is that they have a verse that they don't know what it means. Now, what happen, even if they found the answer themselves, it's how we do it is that we have a conflict pool situation and we knock it off. We sort of like take hours to look at it, because I'm really a great fan of whoever you are as in a person or player should not influence who your character is. And somebody once said to me, but you have to reward them for good role play. And I said, no, I don't feel I can. And I don't know if you remember Longshanks EPG, who played Hengist. He was a fencer, as in a competition fencer. And I always remember, so if somebody can role play and make a social interaction better, why can't he talk about fighting and get a better role with that? It's the same analysis. So I'm always about not, and some people get really annoyed about it, but some players invest into those social skills. So it's interesting in M Space, Minsk, who is played by Medivac, is full of social skills. That's his area, but Hazra is not. It's more Bartleby who has those social skills. And so I think it really should be down to the character rather than the player. And that's probably one of my weird things. And a lot of people disagree with me, and I know, but it's my game. There was some other things that I just wanted to talk about because I'm slightly over time. But exactly. It's the dice that always, and that's why anybody can play D&D. Anybody can play a role-playing game because it's nothing to do with the person. It's to do with the character. And if you've ever played Call of Cthulhu, this happens a lot in Call of Cthulhu, is that they have an idea role. And we've used that in Mithras. So if they ever get puzzled about what's happening or they don't know what they should be doing next, then they can actually roll their ideal role. Or I'll say, roll your ideal role. And therefore, as a GM, I'll give them a pointer to it. One of the really nice things, and this is the last thing that I just wanted to talk about, this actually gave some inspirational reading, which I thought was such a great thing. And I remember looking at these and then going off to the local library, because I never bought books, going off to the local library and looking up and seeing whether or not I can actually find some of these. And one of the things is it says to read H.P. Lovecraft. Oh, Stormbringer is the name of the sword. It was Michael Moorcock. Stormbringer, Stealer of Souls. That was the one that I was trying to remember. Good books. Yeah, so H.P. Lovecraft is in here, which of course is what Call of Cthulhu is based on. So yeah, so this was practically the book that I read before going to bed every night growing up through my teenage life. Because I was always the dungeon master. I very rarely played. I was always the person. I think that's something to do with my control. Because one of my anxiety is sometimes set off with lack of control over the situation. And I think that's why I was a dungeon master, because I was always in control. A lot of things have changed with my dungeon mastering, and I'll probably do another one of these live streams about it when we get there. So thank you for supporting the channel. I really do appreciate it. It's lovely you all being here and listening and chatting in the chat. I do these every Monday, 7 o'clock, and it's always something to do with role-playing games, or something to do with editing and creation like that. So whichever one it is, it's worth sticking around. And remember, it's only the second half of the broadcast that is available afterwards. Please remember that you can give your super thanks to the stream by pressing that lovely $ sign in a lovely cute heart. And there should also be a join button if you would like to become part of the channel. And if you press on it, there's a video saying what you will get, what your perks will be for joining one of the becoming a member of the channel. Okay, thank you, Troll Fan Book Troll. It's lovely to have you. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, because I love talking and I love reminiscing as well, and it's absolutely fantastic. Okay, I will be back on Twitch tomorrow night, or maybe in the afternoon. We'll see how things go with some Guild Wars 2 and maybe some Minecraft in the afternoon. So do come along and watch that. If you're not already subscribed to this channel, then please consider liking and commenting or subscribing. I really would appreciate that. Okay, until later, everyone, have a wonderful evening. Have fun. And remember, you just enjoy your RPGing, and I'll catch you all next time. See you, everyone. Goodbye. Transition now.